All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode three. No, that's definitely not the episode we're on. Episode six of Measured Response. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And I should probably introduce myself still. I'm Jeff, also known as Ysengrin Online. I am in Low Skill Games Organized Play and play some Netrunner every now and again. Safer, do you want to say hi?
You didn't. Oh, I thought you were going to say introduce yourself, and I was like, you didn't fall for the trap. Hi, I'm Safer.
Yeah.
Lead dev, lead balance team / format curation team, general game designer.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got an interesting episode because I was initially hoping to do like a full meta report of what we've seen from districts right now, and boy, my week sure got away from me. So I have not had time to really look at this in detail. I guess Safer, maybe we'll start with just our impressions of the meta, and then we've got a bunch of callers to call in to talk about what they think the meta, what their thoughts are on the meta. But I feel like we could do a little bit of table setting on what our impression of the meta is, maybe without trying to be opinionated about whether or not it's good or bad, but just kind of where we think it stands, and that way people can correct us when they come on as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty, personally, I enjoy playing in this meta, and I've continued to enjoy playing in the meta, and I've enjoyed continue to deck build in it. It feels like there's still kind of like more room to explore and figure out like what's going on. It's also, I know this feels like the first time where I feel like I'm almost at the forefront, for better or for worse, where, I was doing a lot of exploration with the PD list, so I feel pretty well informed on that. And then the fact that Seb is as good as he is means that I just get to like jump into comfort and play some of the best the runner list. So it's just a matter of circumstance, but yeah, like I feel like there's still plenty more to explore, and I still hadn't even gone to all of my original deck lists when DP came out that I wanted to build. So
Yeah.
how are you feeling about it?
I've got to play less Netrunner than I would have liked to have. It's been an interesting meta for sure. Like it feels very different, I think, than a lot of the Elevation meta. Elevation had a very like, if to me, like I felt like I really saw like the value, and like just decks felt like it was a lot of value engines, and like Alco was probably the closest you got to an exception, even though that deck, I mean, all Netrunner decks to some extent are playing a value resources game under the hood if you look carefully. But like the like corpse side in particular feels like it's pulling in a lot of very different directions. And like every corp feels very different to play against, rather than being like, oh, am I playing against assets in red, assets in green, assets in yellow? This meta feels like it's got more flavors to it, where like Jinteki deck, like the Jinteki decks, the HB decks, the Wayland decks, there are NBN decks, as much as it's not super popular at the moment. Like they're all asking very different things. And then like runner side, this is like the first meta in quite a while where it's like it's not clear to me that like a reg deck is like even, I guess, like is not a clear best deck in format, which is like I feel like a huge change from the last like 2 to 3 years of play. Which like
I don't know. I think okay, I'm not super high on Bippy, but like the Lou companions lists, those are pretty reg.
that's fair.
Those are pretty reg.
But I guess it's not clear to me that those are better than, or like clearly better, or like clearly like exactly the same power level as some of the more out there stuff. Which I think like usually
Sure.
in the last couple of metas has been like, oh yeah, if you want to be creative and do some stuff, like there's powerful stuff that Seb can do, but playing Reg Sable is like on average going to be as good or better.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it actually feels like you're like you give up some stuff by playing Reg Lu, you give up other stuff by playing some of the other strong runner decks. So I think that's a different dynamic. Yeah. I don't know. This meta might be leaning a little bit into rock paper scissors more than I would like, but I think that also might just be because the meta is underexplored and like underdefined at the moment, where it feels like every event has a little bit of its own meta, which is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Cool. Well,
it's cool.
we've got a guest on the line, and actually, this question wasn't specifically about the meta, but we'll have some other ones. But I figured this is an interesting one to start on, nonetheless, especially as we mentioned that Seb is a big deck. So, guest, would you mind introducing yourself and then giving us your question?
Hey, I'm Mithir. I recently won London regionals and got second at Reading districts. The districts, not regionals, bloody hell. But yeah, and I was asking about sort of more from a card design standpoint, which is that like how do we feel about like Devil Charm and its effects on making ice destruction really easy and not having to really interact to accomplish ice destruction? You know, in history, historically, ice destruction was done through like Parasite plus. Okay, Siffer was the busted card, but that card got yeeted out of the games pretty quickly. But really, historically, it was Data Sucker plus Parasite, which was still a very interactive way of getting your TI's destruction as strong as it was. Whereas right now we have Devil Charm, which you just slap it down, you find it, dig through your deck as fast as you can because you're Anarch, and now any ice you don't like the look of, you can just blow up on demand. And I want to know, how do you feel about that? How do you feel like card design wise? Like how do you think its effect on the meta? And also, like also I do want to compare it to like D-Res, which is inherently a worse mechanic in terms of reward for the runner. You know, the ice is still there. The corp, if they have the money, can still res it. But the fact that D-Res is actually just harder to accomplish than ice destruction right now. Especially in the context of permanent D-Res, I'm not counting Whoop because Whoop, they can just res it for free afterwards. Yep.
Yeah. So I can start this off with this one. So first off, I hate Devil Charm. I feel like I'm Devil Charm's number one hater, but also that comes within the context not just of this meta, but since I rejoined the game in 2023, I saw Devil Charm and I went, I think this card is stupid. I just generally don't love this idea of invalidating the nuance and counterplay that naturally comes from ice strength. I think what we're currently seeing is this like kind of pinning between small ice that becomes 0 or maybe even somehow makes you a credit off of Tungsten Tailor, mid-range ice that becomes much easier to deal with because of Tungsten Tailor, and then of course at the super high end where things should get punished, you have Devil Charm kind of putting pressure on those things. So ice suites are kind of getting pressure all over the place. And I think that's actually quote unquote a good thing in abstract, where ice suites should be getting pressured at all levels, but this is a serious amount of pressure and probably too much pressure at all levels. So I don't like Double Charm. I will always be a Double Charm hater. In terms of, I guess I'm going to go a little bit deeper into why I specifically dislike Devil Charm from a game design perspective, and that is that you can effectively look at Devil Charm as a card that does absolutely nothing until you have one other card combined with it, and then those two cards together blow up an ice. And really what that kind of translates to is usually three credits, 2 cards, remove ice, and that is part of your icebreaker kind of solutions. And I think that is just way too low of a cost for runners and like ice destruction across the board, and all that is enabled by the Devil Charm portion of this.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit to be.
Go ahead.
I would say there's also a little bit of Devil Charm and Crew are both doing a thing that prior ice destruction didn't do, which is with all prior ice destruction you had to like call your shot in some significant way. Hippo was like very restricted, so the corp had a couple of like the corp, at least in theory, had some counterplay by even just being able to put down ice they couldn't res just to protect their big pieces of ice. Or like Parasite at least required you to put things on the ice itself, and like at various points of the game that was an easier or harder ask. So like the thing was a little bit less relevant. But I think the like both Devil Charm and the crew being threats to every ice at the same time like also is an element of what's doing the restriction here. Like if you had to install Devil Charm like a boomerang or something on on a singular piece of ice, I think it would be a very different conversation, even if the rest of the text was similar.
I'm gonna say that the college shot thing is a good shout and dynamic, but I actually think that really that if it was just the 2 cards and you actually had to call your shot, it still wouldn't have been as meta relevant as it was in the past and currently. Like the chisel charm lists are only relevant now because of simulchip. Like if you didn't have
Yeah,
simulchip, then you couldn't realistically do this. And so you dump the the chisels into the bin, and now it's still that 2-card combo for now 2 credits, but you had a little bit more setup involved. So
yeah. I cut you off of your other point, though though I've agreed with with what you've been saying so far for sure.
So the other aspect here was like D-res and why is D-res, not as good as ice destruction. And I think that this is the kind of thing where it can change really quickly. It could change with, 1 card, 2 cards, and all of a sudden, we could be talking about how D-res is as powerful as it's ever been. So I think that probably emotionally D-res is actually somehow harder to deal with than ice destruction. In many ways, I think that also there's like some additional hidden, I'm not going to say costs, but like downsides to D-res over ice destruction. Whereas D-res, if you really don't think you can afford to res that ice again, or you're struggling to, and you need a new ice to go over top of it, it will increase the install cost by still being there. Yes, you have the choice to over install it, but now you have that like lost version that's happening. The other thing is that it's not in the bin, and sometimes like things like Bran can say like, okay, well, you trashed it, but now that it's in the bin, I actually have like a new target that gives relevance to my other things. We also have, of course, things like reanimation protocol. Yeah, reanimation protocol now that kind of can specifically bring back things that were destroyed by ice, but not things that were deresed. So I think that Derez is worse than ice destruction. I think it's always going to be worse than ice destruction, but I think that's partially just because it's Derez is in the faction that has other portions of like econ denial, and it's just one of the forms of econ denial, and that can get overbearing really quickly.
Yeah, I think like there's I like that second point to me. I actually think is a big part of why the cards are the way they are. I think like if I think like if you took 1,000 foot view, like Drez is too weak, especially relative to how strong ice destruction is. But Drez is also directly synergistic with the criminal game plan, which is a lot about credit denial. And like the Anarch game plan, at least in current standard, like ice destruction isn't like like I don't know. It's to me, it's a funny thing where it's like it's a core part of the Anarch identity, but it doesn't feel like it's meant to be like an engine of Anarch. Whereas like Drez at least seemed, especially in the Liberation cycle, was like looking to make Drez a bit of an engine, and like it hooks in with the rest of what Criminal was already doing. So I think there was just some level of like, hey, let's be a little conservative with the power level of this, because if Criminal Denial gets good and Drez is quite strong, it just says, okay, the whole faction now has this huge coherent package. If Ice Destruction is strong as Anarch, like Anarch Anarch has other elements of what it does. Like, Essa does Essa things. Seb, like, I guess is defined with Ice Destruction because Ice Destruction happens to be the like one of the payoffs. But like there's nothing inherently about taking a tag that says, oh, you have to be doing Ice Destruction, I guess. And like Doomrig Anarch has been like good forever and was not at all about ice destruction. It was just about being very efficient and strong. And so I think there's like some element of the like Drez fits better, like is directly in line with what the core identity of criminal is in a way that ice destruction isn't, and so it ends up being more powerful on a card-to-card basis because it's trying to justify a slot. Maybe that's wrong. That's kind of my outside perspective on it to some extent.
Yeah, I think I would disagree a little bit insofar as because fixed strength breakers are like, and like Tungsten Tailor are like such a big part of Anarch, at least right now, but I think in general, being able to blow up the biggest ice means that you only have to deal with the ice that your breaker suite is good for. So I would push back a little bit on saying that Ice Destruction is kind of separate to what Anarch is doing, because we have seen Ice Destruction decks that also just play breakers. We saw it back pre-rotation. I think we're seeing it again now crop up a little more. But that's neither here nor there. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is like, how do you feel about like the way Crew Charm works, being that you have to res the ice before you can get it blown up, whereas things like Boomerang or Botulus, if you choose to commit it beforehand, other ways to quote unquote invalidate ice. If you choose to commit them beforehand, the corp can choose to save their money. Whereas with ice destruction, almost certainly you have to spend that money and then just lose it basically to the drain.
I think that actually Speed Racer in the comments brought up a fairly good point here where, the Devil Charms are still somewhat limited in terms of their usage. Like they remove from game, they're unique. So you do only get 3 of them and only one at a time. So there is...
Most of them are playing 2 now, aren't they? I don't even think they're playing 3. I think they're just like, wait, 2 is enough. It depends on the list.
I think all lists are on 3. I mean, 3, there was like a time period, I feel like, during Elevation Standard where we were cutting down to 2, and definitely in Seb. And I'm less familiar with the Louvre versions, but I think they're still on 3. But generally speaking, like when you want to have it, you want to have it. So I think 3 is probably correct, especially right now with Milius and all these other things. Getting back to the exact point here, there is some still decision making to be made within trying to force the runner to use the charms at suboptimal times. But I just think that it's not nearly as nuanced as the other ones like Boomerang and other things. That being said, Boomerangs also do still have the effect of just kind of constantly being there throughout the game and coming back. Botulus can effectively destroy an ice, whether it's rezzed or not. So I think all of these points are honestly, they're like the different texture that make them feel different. And I think that is good. I just wish that Devil Charm didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do generally agree. Like, there have been times where I'm like, Devil Charm's not that bad. And it's like, I think it is right now the combination of, like, small ice, like, the role that small ice plays is pinched by certain parts of the Anarch card pool. The role that medium ice plays is pinched by yet another good card in the Anarch card pool. And then the big ice is also all, like, every range of ice is attacked very cleanly within the same faction. I think feels a little bit off at the moment, and Devil Charm is like the most out of pocket feeling of all of those effects to me. Though I think, I don't know, Tungsten Tailor is feel, I don't know, feels like it's going to be an all timer. And one day when Andre and I can finally finish editing our tier lists, we'll have some thoughts there too. But
thank you for reminding me that you all still haven't finished your edits. I want my content. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm trying. It's doing card fly-ins takes a silly amount of time. Even though I've got it pretty efficient now, but
I believe that.
All right. Well, thanks, Meteor, for coming back on. And any
thank you. As much as
shout-outs?
Shout-outs to Scrubs. I mean, I don't think I would have done nearly as well as I did without them. And also, sorry, Sebs, I didn't get to defend your guy because I think Seb's actually fine. But oh well. There's a lot of people with the queue, so yeah. I'll let them in now. Honestly.
Cool. Fantastic.
Oh,
yeah.
Shit. Discord, let me leave. Discord, let me leave.
You
it's
can't
not coming
escape.
up. Kick me, please. Actually, kick me. It's not coming up. I don't know why.
No. I'm trying to wait. Hold on. I don't want to like kick you from the whole
Uh,
server. What the heck?
well, he's dropped now.
Okay,
But
great.
I, that's so funny.
That's very funny. Let's do this and then.
I
All right.
love kick me, please. Get me out of here. Help! I
All
can't
right.
escape.
Well, we've got another great guest on. Another returning guest. So, Spider Bro, could you introduce yourself to the stream, and then I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah. What's up, Safer? What's up, Jeff? Spider-Bro again, on behalf of the Maker's Eye. My takes are pretty simple. Should we do the first one first? I think I have like two big ones.
Yeah, sure. Wait, let's go in order.
Yeah. So the first one is that something in OB, specifically Tempo OB, has to go. It's just too good. It wins too much. It has a ridiculous overall win rate while also maintaining like a really strong opposite side win rate. And it also has a winning matchup into the best runner in the format. So I have a handful of bans that I would like to propose. The first is Extract. I think 6 credits, little downside on a card is very, very strong. Having Ob with a maybe lower potential for bounce back econ and making it more reliant on keeping like Regolith or Anthills alive is maybe okay, and maybe it can still pop off if it's rich enough, but it'll be harder to get there. Azef is another one, or should we kind of go like take by take?
No, I mean I'm happy to take all of them first.
Okay. Yeah. So my second suggestion is Azef. 3-2 is already super good, but Ob gets like a ton of tempo off of scoring this. Just like randomly sniping out key cards from the runner's hand is like really good. And again, the 3-2 with like little to no downside is very strong. I think it's basically in every single tempo Ob list nowadays. Some other like spicier proposal that I had. A lot of people will suggest Ob itself. I don't necessarily believe in this. I think that, there are ways to temper this kind of dominance or like address this kind of dominance without completely obliterating an entire mini faction, as it were. And then finally, pairwise with Mavirus. I know SBT doesn't do pairwise bans, so this would just be like you can't have Mav and Ob in the same list. Being able to fetch Rego, being able to fetch Hollow on demand, and also shoring up your very strong matchup into like Audrey list is pretty strong, but probably not going to happen, but could be cute.
If you want to go first.
Yeah, those are my proposals.
Yeah, so I want to ask some questions about a couple things there. So one is you said something like, "Oh, it needs to go because there's a ridiculous win rate against the best runner deck in format." I guess a question is that like, do you feel like that is because looking at the data, Ob has a particularly good matchup into Seb, or that Ob is just a good matchup into everything, including Seb?
I think it is. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers now. It's one of the few corps that doesn't straight up lose into Seb, statistically. I mean, it is kind of ridiculous across the board. But I'm less concerned about the specific matchup into Seb and more concerned about the overall, 60% win rate in Swiss with like a 70% opposite side win rate, meaning it's not just farming lower tables, it's like winning games that matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I guess one thing I've been thinking about is like, if it's winning, like it is winning games that matter, but also it's being played by players that are like probably also in the high skill bracket. And I always wonder, it's like, PD has there's more PD games and more Melius games, right? And so it's like, the players that are bringing Ob are like doing better on their runner side, even irrespective of their corpse side, which is like an interesting thing about how it's showing up in the data. I don't think that that's not meant as a refutation. It's just like one of the weird ways to think about opposite side win rate is all like, yes, it's one way to say, yeah, it's winning games that matter. Another way to say is it's being brought by players who are winning a lot of games as runner too. Like way more statistically. Well, I guess not way more, right? The average runner win rate's like 43%, and like the average ob is 47, so it's not like a huge difference by any means. PD is on
I think
the
before we
same
get
line.
too into it, I do want to issue a correction. I think I was looking at the wrong stats page. I currently have ob as 70% in Swiss and a 47.7% opposite side win rate, which is actually
Yeah.
pretty comparable to PD. So they have the same opposite side win rate, but ob has, a ridiculous 70%.
Yeah, an extra
Base win rate.
10% win rate compared to PD.
Yeah, 10 to 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess another thing I was looking at, and like I'm curious, this is because it's it's on your site, even though I know this is not like the thing you have the deepest like the flow matrix diagram that you look at. It's like ob is like, oh, it's farming everything from Seb, but then like every runner is actually getting value from playing ob, which I thought was like an interesting thing about that. And it's like it doesn't quite match up when I look at the win rate data. It's like, oh no, actually runners are still losing to ob quite a bit. But it was an interesting thing when you were talking about the like, oh, ob has this crazy win rate against Seb, and I'm like, okay, yes, but like playing every other runner seems to actually have some advantages into Seb.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more to do with like my lack of familiarity with the Markov stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
I-
I don't want
I
to
would just
hold
push
you
back on that.
over barrel on
I
that,
think-
especially because when you look at
I
like
think
it's like, oh, Lou, Arasana, and Vic, the like other popular runners, like it's in the 70s win rate, though still not a huge number of games played against any of those, but it's still in that high win rate category.
I believe that, like, I could be misunderstanding the Markov method, but I believe that the runners would be getting sand from ob just because it's like a flat, right? They like their other matchups are more polarized, and so they're relatively gaining, quote unquote, more sand from ob, even though ob's just like win rate is higher.
I guess to me
like-
the interesting thing is like the flow
It could be
is
that. It could
towards the
also just be,
runner
like-
rather than towards the corp, but
Yeah.
Oh, is the
my-
flow
my
actually
interpretation is
towards
just that
the?
ob is so
That's
big in this analogy that like the physics makes it push back into the runner side. But I don't think I don't know. Before I like catch myself saying something completely statistically inaccurate, I'm gonna like try to not explain it.
yeah, we don't need to dig into that too much. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so back to the takes. Extract
We started off
or
with,
Azef.
with Extract and Azef as bans. Yeah, I guess like I don't think those are if the premise is in your case like, oh, ob is absurdly powerful, like I think both of those bans to me are different levels of debilitating. I think Extract is basically saying you can probably bring ob, but you're probably not going to finish in the top cut and like that is probably a fine place to be. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people celebrating for that. And I do think it is a little bit silly that ob gets to do an ID trigger and gain 6 credits. I think it's like, I keep thinking back to that, like what other cards like Seamless Launch for Mistake and Extract continues to be one of those like, yeah, the numbers on this card I think are inappropriate for what the card does. So like I think that to me seems pretty prominent. Azef is like probably Azef gets banned, ob loses some win rate but still survives and as a deck that people play. But and I will say, like, Crank, like, how many political prisoners does ob need to create before the solution is just to ban ob? It's a little bit funny to me about that because A, I think ob does something unique in the game, which I actually think like there's some value to saying, hey, this is a unique thing, and B, like, who else? I don't feel like anyone would be playing. No one ever played Cyber Sand. No one ever played like. You maybe saw 1 or 2 extracts in some Zwicky decks, but it's like banning cards that only ob plays instead of banning ob to me doesn't feel like a big loss. And Azef would probably be a bit of a loss by that measure because there are Wayland Rush decks that will play Azef, I think. Maybe that's a little bit out of date, but that was my impression.
Yeah, I mean, I consider like if you think about like DreamNet and Hosh, and then Hosh's eventual ban, just because Hosh like pushed out other archetypes, like I don't feel like ob is pushing out other Wayland in the same way that another kind of arguably bannable ID was.
Yeah, I think that's a decent way to think. It's like it's not as popular, but like we are seeing new Vim BTLs, like we are seeing other Wayland decks that have their own identities do things without being like extremely niche, I guess. But we've talked over Safer, who has not had a chance to opine, though Safer obviously has some responsibilities here, so I'm not expecting him to be able to say everything. But
Oh no, it's fine. I could just give. I mean, I'll start with the general spiel of, "Hi, these are my opinions." Also, yes, I help make some of these decisions. I'm very good at what's the right not categorizing. Oh gosh, what is the word
compartmentalizing.
called? Compartmentalizing. Yes, thank you. Very good at that word that I definitely remembered. And so I can talk about this pretty easily, even though I wrote the ban list article this morning. So yeah. Um, so but actually, also part of this is just going to be asking you a question. So, you started with the premise of Ob is too good. Why do you think Ob is too good besides the win rate data?
I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I've heard and experienced the like Omega high roll, like win turn 5 rush ob thing. But I think from a like gameplay perspective, it's super flexible into a lot of different matchups. It can find whatever ice it wants, whatever assets it wants. It can turtle, it can rig shoot, it can kill you with MR. Um, and so I think the sheer amount of options and the kind of like skill expressivity that it gives very good players, I think is a bit dangerous. Like in a very skilled pilot's hands, I think things have to go catastrophically wrong for an op to be losing a game.
Could I ask actually?
Would you?
Oh,
I'm gonna. Nah,
yeah.
I'm asking the follow up here.
Okay,
So,
okay.
would you say that that is a bad outcome if a highly skilled player on a difficult to pilot deck is able to outplay an opponent?
No, I don't think so. But I think that's where the stats come in. Like that's where it is, you have to figure out like when is it too much, right? Like I think we could all agree, like if a highly skilled player on a deck is winning 100% of their games, like maybe there's an issue with that deck, right? And so at some point, if the win rate of a deck is much higher than the field by some amount, I think it's worth considering a ban or considering some kind of, addressing.
So I think that the key here is like the degree to which it wins or reliably wins matters. And I guess my like tackling the ob win rate is too high kind of idea and comment. I think that, during districts, people are kind of like housed to their local metas. And you do have, I think, a little bit more noise that can make the data harder to really draw meaningful conclusions from. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like thinking about, okay, what does the diversity that you hit on and the flexibility of the identity, like what does that do in deck building? What does that do like when you're building a runner list and you're expecting an ob to come to the field? What does it do during the megacities season when the player pool expands a little bit and people are traveling a little bit more for events? And do we think that there's space for the meta to evolve and ob have a healthy place in it, even though it is a strong deck? Those are kind of the things I think are also helpful to like think about in this context for like just when we're talking about like these are the cards we think that we should ban. I think that the other question should be, okay, what are the ramifications of ob being powered down, and does it actually leave us with a better result than ob being the best deck in the format? And do we even know that ob is the best deck in the format right now?
Yeah,
I think the answer is yes. But
I mean, yeah, I would struggle to. It's one of those funny things where it's like I'm not, whenever I sit down to play Ob, I'm never like, oh man, this is a free win for me. I'm a 70% corp against the field, but like the data does say that, right? So it's interesting to think about that gap of like when I sit down to play Ob, and play against Ob, I always feel like we're gonna have a game. Whereas like there have been versions of like Strong Corpse, where you sit down and you go, I just gotta get lucky here. I just gotta hope and pray, and like some of that is always going to be influenced by deck decisions, and it's like, oh yeah, the decks I play tend to just inherently have a decent odd matchup, probably in part because I'm trying to make sure I have tools whenever I'm building a deck to beat my own deck. That's just like a bias I think a lot of players have when building their Corp and Runner decks, is to make them good against each other. And so like I'm always thinking about ob things and have a lot of ice interaction in a lot of my lists, and then I would play against asset decks and just get run over, right? I think that's sort of an interesting just element of the like, you know, there's we talk a lot about metas in previous episodes, and it's like if what is it like if a deck doesn't if a deck is like always winning and people have no options, like that's generally unhealthy. I guess like it's not clear to me like is Ob always winning because people don't have options? Is it winning a lot right now because people are playing runner lists that aren't trying to answer it? Is it like there's a lot of I think unknowns to me, and like there's things where I'm like, you know, I've played against criminal decks that just steamroll Ob, but they have other matchup problems, or people are playing like, you know, they're all in on Vic, and if they hit DreamNet on turn 2, I lose, and if they don't hit DreamNet by turn 2, I'm going to coast to a victory. And like maybe that's actually a sign that you need to take criminal a different direction, and like there's that other stuff that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think we've got you had, I guess, maybe Safer. Like, do you have any quick comments on like the like pair bans, as Spider Broke was calling them, where it's like, oh, you can only play one of these two cards?
I mean, I love them personally as a hyper engaged player. I think, you know, I also think of okay, the best example that I know of paired bans like this are actually in complex bans in like Pokemon like singles, like the video game. That's run on like a website by volunteers. There's some analogies there. But there's like a council who makes like decisions and stuff, and you also have a hyper engaged player base. And you know, they do complex bans where okay, certain moves are banned on some, but like only on some Pokemon. And I think that what they have found is that they kind of shy away from those over time because they're complex. Like players, it's not completely apparent to people how that happens. Now we have Netrunner DB, which is helpful, but I can still imagine there would be players who maybe have been playing the game for a while, but they haven't played it in a little bit. You know, they're preparing for a tournament. You know, you go, hey, put your deck list into NRDB, and then they find out that there's this kind of complex ban. Like, those are kind of the trade-offs of doing it. So, like, I don't know, my designer brain like would love to do these kind of hyper specific things, but I just think that the trade-offs are probably ultimately not worth it.
Cool. Do we
I
want
love getting me into some minutia.
Yeah. And then you had some proposals for Seb as well. So could you give us some ideas, or like why you think Seb needs bans, and what bans you would target?
Yeah, I think I might be echoing Visitron a bit if anyone has caught his most recent tier list videos, but I don't think Seb is as strong of a runner as Ob is a corp. I do think Seb's actual gameplay is, you know, I feel like teetering on NPE sometimes, like negative player experience, just because the existence of Crew Charm completely flattens the board state, where almost every ice in the game just dies on contact, and the like headlock engine is kind of inevitable. So the two proposals that I have are either Double Charm, we talked about that a bit already, I think, and Praxis, Privileged Access. It does just so much in Seb. It forces the corp to ice archive sometimes. It brings back 3 cards for dirt cheap, and generally no other ID cares too much if Praxis goes. And then finally a spicier proposal, which is just another pairwise ban idea, pairwise Seb, and transfer. So you cannot play transfer in Seb. I don't think this will happen, so we don't have to talk about it.
Right, so as the Seb enjoyer,
Yeah.
I think that I think I'd roughly agree that there is more. It is going to be easier for Corpse if Seb continues to perform as well as it has in the last couple weeks. I think it is easier for Corpse to account for that matchup in deck building than it is for runners to account for Ob. But I think that is less about their raw power levels and more that Seb is a known quantity and Ob still can develop and get refined. Seb is more constricted in deck building, whereas for Ob, truly the sky is the limit. And there have been so many seasons, competitive seasons, where we've seen Ob not at the top, and then over time, some list gets figured out, some sort of tech gets figured out, and then it bubbles to the top. So I generally agree with the trajectory of I don't think Seb would get much stronger over the course of the season. So that means like it doesn't would necessarily warrant bans within of itself, I don't think. But if we are talking about specific candidates, I think cards like no transfer or no privileged access really kind of kick the legs out from under it. I think that it just kind of says the ID doesn't exist anymore, the archetype doesn't exist anymore, and I don't think that is really what we want to achieve either. Like, I think a Seb is a pretty. I enjoy playing Seb. I'm biased in that I enjoy playing Seb, but there are people that out there that are not me that also enjoy playing Seb, and it is a strong deck, and it is a nice destruction deck, which is going to have some strong emotional reactions to it. But if it is not as strong as it currently is, then I don't think people would be necessarily complaining that Seb exists.
Yeah, I think, it's like, to me, Seb is an interesting counterpoint to Ob, where I do think actually, like, Ob is, like, if it's like, oh, I think Ob is the stronger overall deck, where, like, if we held Worlds, like, next month or whatever, I would say, oh yeah, Ob's going to be a significant, if not majority, of the top 16. But I don't think I would say the same thing about Seb. I think the deck is more exploitable than Ob is at the moment. But at the same time, I actually think Seb restricts what corps are allowed more than Ob restricts what runners are allowed, kind of from my perspective. And so, like, to me, that's like the argument that, like, I like for saying, oh, Seb probably needs a little bit of a power level check, because I think Seb is, like, part of the reason that no one plays NBN right now. And not because of the tag interaction, but because of how his ice destruction interaction works with the tools that are available to NBN. And, like, Speed Race, SSJ Speed Racer, I think is right that, like, a lot of the people that spend the most time complaining about Seb, from what I have seen at a glance, and not accusatorily, as someone who also likes to play wide assets, Seb just farms PD in a pretty ridiculous, like, all of the wide PD decks right now. And, like, that is part of why Seb, I think, has such a good win rate right now, is a lot of people are playing these, like, Asa style wide PDs, and, like, Seb has, like, a built-in amazing matchup because he's good at attacking that deck in every single aspect that's trying to win at the same time. And so, like, Seb is both benefiting from the meta and shaping, like, I guess, what's the way to think about this? Like, restricting what corps are allowed to not be played, but, like, because we're in districts, because people are playing more locally, playing more what's fun rather than what's proven, like, Seb is getting to look really good because of that. So to me, I'm not convinced Seb is, like, a problem, but I also wouldn't hate a Seb ban because I think, or a ban targeted at just reducing the power level of Seb. I wouldn't want to see his, like, knees taken out, or I guess his wheelchair wheels taken away, because Because I do think it's an interesting deck, and I think Headlock being part of Netrunner is a good thing. It's just when he achieves it, when Headlock is too easy to achieve, that can be a little bit like you want Headlock to be something that you don't go into the table and go, okay, I know I'm going to get headlocked every time I sit down against this ID. You want to be like, oh, some games I can outplay, avoid the headlock, and kind of make it. And I don't think that's true for very many decks right now, that you can avoid the Seb headlock phrase. But like except unless you decide to build a certain type of deck, and like you instead, like then you can have a great Seb matchup and it's not a problem. But like that's just so rock paper scissorsy that like it's a little bit against what I like vibes wise.
Yeah, I also think that Seb is actually pretty interesting because Seb doesn't actually reliably set up a headlock in the early / mid game, because Seb can brick pretty hard. Sorry, there's a cat in my way. So, sorry for any background noise from cat. The Seb can brick pretty hard, and that means that, you know, sometimes as the corp, you can just kind of chill in the early and mid game if they're having a rough time. But what happens is inevitably they find their pieces, they price enough and logo enough that they find things, and then oh, I didn't see the transfers in the early game. Well, you can bet that I'm about to get 3 transferred in the late game. And so there's a little bit of like a comeback arc, but Seb frequently feels like you can turn a corner and win nonetheless.
Cool. Well, Spyro, any final thoughts before we get our next guest on?
No, I would just, I'll plug the Maker's Eye again.
Yeah, it's a
encourage
great
everyone to look at the
resource.
stat page. Yeah, feel however you want about it. I look at it and I see a single lone orange dot floating far up and above to the right of every other dot.
It is stark. Yeah, it is very much a notable outlier.
Right. Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, thanks again for having me on. Shout out ATL, shout out Mom. See y'all.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we've got, I think, our last direct meta take question for, well, not quite our last one, but I think a different one. So, Cold Lava, could you introduce yourself to your stream and then give us your meta take?
Hi, I'm Cold Lava. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I've been playing competitive Netrunner for 3 years now, and before I say my take, I'll have the caveat that I am a very common odd player.
Yeah, I think you're probably either have or will soon steal it from me as the most consistent odd player in New England. So.
And generally, my take is I think I agree with a lot of what you and Safer have been saying, and I would argue for a no changes ban list between districts and megacities.
So that's, I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you like a no changes.
So basically, there's a couple of things. So you were saying how one of your points was, while Ob seems to be the best deck, and I wouldn't argue with that, the games seem to be interesting, and it's not like you go into the game just hoping to win. And I'll say from playing the other side, I have been run over by decks a lot of the times. I think especially the current Ob lists don't have too much of a late game if they can't win out. Your biggest ice is envelopment, and once that leaves, you really can't tax out the runner. And then I think we also just have I don't know if it's quite rock paper scissors, but a bit of a chain of bans that could lead to issues where right now Ob is showing as the best corp deck, and Seb maybe showing as the best runner deck, and Ob having a good matchup into Seb. I think if you hit Ob, Seb can just run over the meta. Then if you have to hit Seb, I think the PD lists, like you're saying, Seb having a great matchup into that, they kind of rise up and they're very hard to deal with otherwise. And I think you might wind up with just like a chain of bans trying to contain everything, and you'll wind up just in a much weaker power format where it took a lot to get there. Where we're in a relatively interesting format, it feels like. And you may unintentionally wind up in who knows what format. And then I think my third point is I just don't think the meta is solved yet. I think the obelisk started showing up 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and I don't think people have had that much time to react to them. I think there can be good criminalists that come into and start eating on those obelisks. The early criminalists like Vic, I think, were maybe a little undercooked, and so didn't quite have the play into Ob. And I think some other runners, especially like San Begamot, can just kind of walk through all of Ob's barriers, and there's not one else in the list to deal with. So I think there's a lot of other decks that could start playing into Ob, and I think we have time for the meta to really take a turn.
Cool. I guess Safer, I'm curious to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah. So I'm wondering how cheeky I should be. I guess
actually,
I don't know. We're gonna. I think that I don't think that this is going to be that much of a problem, but we're going to be a little cheeky, and the more you read into this, the more it is probably going to backfire. But I did write the words "no changes" multiple times in the article today, so make of that what you will. I completely agree with the fact that the meta is not solved. I completely agree that there is more room to develop. I think that things could, if let's say, just for sake of example, that there were no changes on the upcoming ban list. I think that our understanding of the meta and what it would look like in 2 months would look entirely different than what we kind of think of it today. That's just naturally what happens. I don't know if that would be better or not, because how do you know what you don't know, right? I think that what we have right now in part feels good because it is new, and new in card games like this will always feel good. So there's some amount of like prediction and just like judgment based. Some of this is just going to have to be vibes, and some of it is just also personal opinions as well, in terms of what people. I'm losing the plot a little bit here. What the point that I want to hit on here is that no matter what ends up happening, there are always going to be some number of people that are going to say, I would have preferred the alternative, because you just don't know what you don't know, and it is impossible to live in two realities at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Which means that, like, when talking about this, in some ways, like, it's going to be impossible to determine who is quote unquote right or who is wrong, or what situation would have been better or more fun or whatever else, right? I think that part of the reason why I think like the meta would look a lot different than it would look in 2 months is because Shaper hasn't really been seeing that much experimentation. Shaper is a natural, usually has a pretty good matchup into Ob. So like the longer that Ob would stay around and be dominant, the more people would probably explore Shaper, the more meta relevance that has. Things adapt and change over time, right? The probably only thing that I want to push back on is that you mentioned like the chain of bans then leads to a weaker power format. And I don't think that a weaker power format is inherently a worse format. In a lot of ways, a weaker power format can allow for more deck diversity, for more skill expression, because what matters is your deck building choices and your play more than the deck that you chose to bring and the matchup. And that's the reason why it's like, okay, well, if you do this chain of bands, we go into the unknown. It's like, okay, well, it's either the chain of bands that takes us to the unknown, or no changes, which still takes us into the unknown. So the question for me is like, what are the trade-offs? What are the potential, like, what are, like, using my the game design like knowledge and like experience, like, what do I think is probably the most likely thing to happen, and just make the best judgment call that we can.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the only thing I would slightly push back on is that, like you were saying, this unknown for the format might be a month or 2 months away, and it feels like at that point, once you get there, you can then make the change to improve the ban list kind of once you have the whole information, as opposed to kind of snapping us into whatever comes out on the far side of the ban list.
That's a great point. Do you happen to know when the scheduled ban lists are for this year?
Was one released? Was the scheduled ban list released with the release of Vantage Point when the last one was?
So it was an article, I think, that was put out in either October or November last year, where before Vantage Point was released.
I made Safer's life really hard, basically.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So the current schedule right now for ban lists is that they come out 2 weeks before the start of every section of the competitive season, and then also with a set release. And so 2 weeks before Megacities is, it is basically next week. That's why Safer talked about writing the article already. And Megacities is not a very long window. It is, I believe, just May and June, and then July is when we start Continentals. So there is not a lot of time for a lot of this stuff, and the turnaround between Continentals and Worlds is so egregious that I have to apologize to Safer at least weekly for it. So, I think there's, I agree. I actually think we should be doing no ban lists, and I have a whole little rant that I'll maybe go on in a minute. But I think Safer is pointing out that there is not a lot of time to collect and analyze a lot of this data, and they have to be ready to act before everything is discovered in a given meta already. And so that some of that we're jumping into the unknown, like they have to be jumping even more into the unknown, and in a way that is just intrinsic to the way that the balanced ban list release work right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
So the next ban list after this upcoming one is July 13th. I didn't go look it up. I'm pretty sure I wrote it earlier today. I should ideally remember that date. But July 13th. So it is 3 months from now. If we were to see a meta development and see early megacities showed, let's say, a continuation of the same, we would have probably a pretty hard choice to make, where we subvert expectations, we potentially release a ban list in the middle, or megacities is truly dominated by some subset of things, right? It's
I think it's a little bit like there's a part of it. It's like the question is like when do you want the meta to stabilize? It's like, oh, if you do a shakeup now, you can let megacities evolve, and then let hopefully Continentals Worlds be small to no ban lists, versus let megacities rip, have Continentals be a bit of a Wild West post a ban list, and hope that it's stabilized by Worlds. And it's just which set of unknowns do you want to embrace? Which events do you want to be more or less unknown? I think is tricky.
Yeah, that is tricky. I kind of like a ban list pre-Continentals with no change between Worlds, but that definitely is more of definitely a preference more than
and
further on the opinion and preference side than
I agree. And it's like I think that's probably my preference too, but you have to be pretty confident that the meta is close to correct before going into megacities, and that you can then target a small adjustment before Continentals, and that you don't need to. It's the like, oh, if we go into megacities as is, and then we discover actually Ob is 70% even when everyone's gunning for it. And now we have to gun Ob, and we go into Continentals with just the unknown of, okay, we've just deleted the best deck from the format. What do we do? Like, what happens next? Like, suddenly, the biggest, for some people, the biggest event they're going to go to all year, and for both Continentals and Worlds, like, are going to have a much less certain meta where advantage of testing groups gets amplified, the advantage of showing up with a surprise gets amplified over the advantage of, oh, I made smart deck building decisions and I made smart gameplay decisions. But yeah, and I think it's like, for me, it's like my priority for me probably is like Worlds should have the, to me, is the ban list I want the most to be a no changes ban list, and then kind of going descending down the list. But I also am a big fan of no changes ban list as a whole. I think the Netrunner community for a long time got really used to ban lists being a way to shake up the meta, because cards were coming out once a year, and so you did 2 to 3 ban list shakeups just to make the game feel different month to month to month. And I think I'm optimistically thinking that we're moving past that period, acknowledging that that's a little bit silly after Vantage Point was a year between releases. But and so, like, moving people away from that expectation that every opportunity for a ban list, there's going to be a ban list change, because I think it's really fun to see metas mature and develop and have the response, counter response, counter response stuff. And when you have frequent ban list changes, they often kind of curtail and reset a clock in a way that could be a little bit annoying, for like that style of development.
Yeah. All right. I do have one fun ban list swap that I would like,
Okay.
which is just swap Nebula and Bologna.
Yeah, I think a spicy one that we get to today is like just release R plus that will curb Seb. But yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. We have our last call-in guest, and then I think we're going to hit 2 other questions. Well, maybe we're just going to do this call-in guest and get to some other questions next week because it is already 8:30. But I'd love to have Red Vortex, if you want to come on and introduce yourself and share your question with us in the audience. That'd be great.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Safer. First, yeah, I'm excited to be on. Yeah, never really joined one of these before, so yeah. I'm gonna just jump into the question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So the most requested questions for tonight are in reference to district winners and top cuts. What decks have surprised you? Are there any decks you saw in playtesting that you expected to be in the meta but have not? If yes, don't tell us, because I'm super excited to see what they're going to be. And do you have any cards that you have high expectations for or thought would need more play? I'll repeat them later, but we can do the first one.
Jeff, do you want to start off?
Man, there's nothing like springing to mind in I guess I should probably look. Like, I feel like there's corp cards that I was expecting to see more of that we haven't seen as much of. I don't know. Flywheel continually to me. I'm like, why is everyone not playing Flywheel? And then it's like, oh, it is kind of hard to put in your deck. I think
More people will start playing Flywheel.
Yeah.
I'm a Flywheel believer.
Boy, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking through like VP.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I actually think that most of my reads were actually correct.
I think
not necessarily the meta, but individual cards.
Yeah, I think I thought Let Them Dream was going to be a little less prolific than it currently is.
Same.
I don't know if it's going to stabilize where it is, if it's going to go up or down. Like, I couldn't tell you which direction the number of Let Them Dreams in a top cut are going to go compared to where it is right now. It seems to me like it's probably a little bit higher than it should be, but maybe that's cope for me just not enjoying the card very much. Um, I think that's maybe the
Yeah.
like. Oh, you know what? The other card that I've seen less of than I was hoping to is probably Rewrite Share. Um, I think that card I was really interested in, and then like have spent zero time actually putting it in decks, and I don't think outside of a notable exception, it's not really showed up very much.
I think I still have hope for Read by Chair, but my hopes were not particularly like crazy. I was just talking about a lot because I thought that it would be. I thought it'd be a card that, like, I think it's going to take a little while for it to get, for its power to be understood, and then I'm still not even going to say it's like going to be the most powerful card ever. No, but I think that might enable some decks. Like I might put this in the archetype enabler tier if I was doing that.
Yeah.
I think Sellout is seeing a little bit less play than I was originally imagining. Tailgate is 100% a card that people should be playing more of. I think that's just true. I think people should actually be playing more Grubber than they are. But also like, yeah, it's an NBN, so I get it. But like Grubber is probably a reason to consider be playing NBN in some ways. Kind of a yellow brand. Yeah, I think the Let Them Dream, I underrated Let Them Dream. I mean, a lot from my initial reading of the card. But then after talking to other members of dev and then being like, no, it's good with X, Y, or Z, I went, okay, sure. And still it's outperformed those expectations.
Yeah, I think actually another card that like it's funny. I've had this Flood the Market has been better than I thought it was going to be by a pretty significant margin, which I think I'm always a little so like way back in like gateway testing, like I remember playing a lot of like flop Asa and being like, oh man, this thing is killing it, and like that deck was not a part of the like gateway release meta for months. Like it actually took, I think it wasn't a deck basically until a bunch of bans or even new card releases happened. And so like I've always been a little bit gun shy that like even if that deck is okay in playtesting, I'm like, oh, this is like a style deck that always overperforms in playtesting. And so Flood the Market like style decks felt similar to me, and it's been interesting to see that no, this is the one that like is, you know, I think it's one of the interesting things has been people moving away from Flood the Market PD. Like there's actually I think 3 different PD decks that have all done well at districts so far, so there's not like a clear best one, but Flood the Market has still outperformed my expectations for it, which was that it was going to be a little bit more niche than it actually is.
Yeah, I think, you know, Flood, like Flop Flood out of PD poetry was explored in playtesting, and we did see it, and it was performing well within playtesting. And we kind of were like, yeah, this is showing all of the normal signs of like a deck that's probably not going to actually be problematic. And I think that the versions in playtesting weren't. And I think that what we have on live is just like a refinement of those concepts that have proven to be like within the range of what one could expect, but just on the top end of that range. Whereas like editorial division at the moment, for example, is within the range of what I expected, but maybe on the slightly lower end of the range that I was expecting, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Is like, yeah, there's some, you can never know the true power level of something in playtesting. You have a range of what you expect, and yeah, I think those are like pretty good opposite kind of cases of like, you know, one is near the bottom of its range, one is probably near the top of what its expected range was.
Oh, I know. Unleash, I think, is the most surprising card.
Oh,
Unleash,
that's fair. That's a good point. Yeah,
that's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have not expected this card to be as meta relevant as it has been through the district season.
Yeah. The fact that
I'm not convinced it's going to continue to be, but
yeah. But like, I wouldn't have even like I forget if I talked about this in the recording with Andre, but like Unleash was a card I would say was like, this is never going to be. Oh no, I think actually we were robbed of this. Unleash had already had this big splashy win by the time we did our recording because we were so late on it. So I wasn't able to do my initial take of this card is never going to win anything. So people can clown on me for that now. I'll say it, that would have been my take if it hadn't already proven me wrong. But yeah. I think that's
Okay, so those are the surprises.
yeah.
Sorry, I should have read the questions one at a time, not all of them at once. My bad.
Yeah.
That's fine. What's the next one?
No, it's all good.
What decks have surprised you? You talked a little bit about the Unleash decks.
Let's see. I think honestly, yeah, I think the Unleashed decks and the actual power of Flood PD have surprised me, and everything else has been kind of to paint for me. Like, I knew Op was going to get better when it got border control like card back. Like, that's kind of just a little bit like, as much as I would love to cope and say no, it's fine. Like, it was clearly going to get better. I think VP taking over as Crim, like, I actually think that's going to be something we move away from, kind of regardless. But like, it's been interesting to see that like VP actually just became Crim for the last 2 months.
Oh wait, I can rag on Andre for something I know.
Oh.
I remember when Baz came out, Andre was like, "It's just better as," and I'm salty that it's just better as, and I was like, "It's not. There's a clear, distinct, like, it's probably going to be better most of the time, but there's a clear and distinct reason for when you would play as. It's not strictly better." And now I think like as is maybe the preferred Grim ID in some ways. Like I think that as probably is being underplayed because of his historical power level, not necessarily his current power level. And that to me is very both surprising and hilarious.
I do think Baz is still just better as, but
they're not the same. They don't do the same thing. They don't have the same output. They don't even like. They want to play some of the same cards.
Yeah,
but not
they have
all
a
of them.
different approach to the game. So like,
yeah. One of them is more fun than the other, in my opinion. But like, come on, it wasn't play experience better as it was.
yeah, that's true.
Power level better as.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of it. I know we were a little bit short with this question, but I also want to quickly get to like 2 other things that we might talk about more in a future episode, but I feel like there's a lot of discussion, so I kind of want to touch on them at least briefly.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to shout out?
Trying to think. Oh, I will have. Oh no, no. Thanks for making a great game. I just got into Netrunner right before Elevation, so it's been a very, very, very fun 2 years, year and a half.
Fantastic. All right, thanks so much,
right.
and hope to have you on again in the future. So I think probably at some point we'll have to do a full discussion on Magic Man. I think what's it? Cobra Bubbles just asked like, what's your opinion on it? For people that don't know, this is a deck that's the closest Netrunners had to a non-deterministic combo runner deck in, I'm going to say, almost a decade now. I think Diaper was actually closer to deterministic than Magic Man is. I think it's, I don't know, it's it puts some weird stresses on organized play, but like I don't think it's a deck I would like to be central to the meta. But like, I don't know, I think it's cool that someone figured it out. I'll be interested to see like a little bit like, hey, does it have time to develop to be a deck? In terms of like, there's been a lot of questions, and if people want to read, there's been a lot of discussion in the TO server. The like official organized play stance at the moment is, as long as you are playing at a reasonable pace of play and not making game like illegal board states, there is nothing intrinsically wrong, and a TO who just gives you a slow play violation because you are playing a lot, taking a lot of actions, is a little bit out of pocket. But like, I will also say the one video, and this is not meant as shade, the one video clip of the deck being played both contains slow play and contains game lossable errors in it, which suggests to me that the deck probably needs to be practiced quite extensively to not run afoul of standard kind of organized play floor policies. So, like, I also will say I'm pretty against putting new floor policies in place that would disallow this style of deck specifically, because now you have a official ban list and a secret ban list that's hidden in implication inside organized play policies. And so, like, that's just not going to be a thing we do. We are going to release, maybe this weekend if I can find the time, some clarifications on what to do if players are playing in time as called and they just can't get to the second player's turn in the amount of time that the TO can allow for the post-time turns. So, like, that is a thing that there isn't good guidance for, and we'll be putting some together. That's sort of my general thoughts on it. I don't know, Safer, if you want to talk about it from a more design experience perspective.
Sure, I can do it from like design experience. So I think it's just fucking cool. Like, like people like doing kit flips. It's so cool that Dull Bulb like came up with this concept, refined it, was a mad lad enough to bring it to an actual tournament. It's like a cool thing to see in the game. I think that I don't want to see it all the time. I don't want to see it all the time. I don't want to see it necessarily to the extent that we've seen it so far. But I think that it is these kind of moments that are like really memorable, and people will like talk about it for a really long time. And it's like, it's just fun. It's cool. It's interesting to see how the thing kind of comes together. I think I'm maybe also slightly biased because I think combos are just kind of interesting. But yeah, like, I think that one, it's just like important to acknowledge like part of the appeal of these kind of ridiculous combos is like inherent within the promise of like card games. And so, like, in some ways, like, I kind of want to like celebrate like the moment. And then we can also talk about how, like, yeah, I think that if you are a player sitting on the opposite side of a table and you have to spend 15 to 20 minutes, let's just say 10 to 20 minutes, even just 10 minutes, right? While your opponent is doing some sort of like really long, mentally taxing combo that you're supposed to pay full attention to, but you don't even know what's going on half the time. Like, if you're frustrated by that, valid feeling. If you're annoyed by that, valid feeling. Like, I might be excited because I'd be like sitting there being like, ooh, show me the cool thing. But it also like, okay, now that I've seen the cool thing, would I now tune out while the person is now like doing all their turn? Like, does it impact? I don't know. There's a lot of like logistical, things that can go into like tournaments and preparation for tournaments and all that jazz. But I think, if someone sat down to my local and had this deck, I wouldn't be unhappy to play against it, right? I'd be pretty interested to play against it. And when they started doing their combo, I'd probably move to their side of the table and be like, okay, how can we figure this out?
Yeah, and that's a difference between a tournament setting and a casual setting too. It's like, I think it's a little bit of like, oh, it's very cool that someone did this, and then, how, like, it's very neat the first time. It's probably less neat the third time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out what role. Like that's kind of a common thing with combo is like it's not usually that. A lot of combos are designed like the best combo decks are actually like the combo decks I guess inherently are trying to reduce their number of interaction points, and so they make games more and more
Yep.
samey, which is like a thing that you want to push against in just about any card game, right? Part of the reason you're playing a card game and not a chess is you want game to game to feel different and non-deterministic.
Oh, I have some nuance to add to that, I think, actually. So,
Okay.
Yes, holistically agree, but combos come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And so, like, let's use Mega Magic as an example. The setup for the combo is very drawing through cards in your deck is not particularly fun or engaging or interactive. I think that there's some decisions to be made there. Okay, I think there's a lot of decisions to be made there, but honestly, most of it just comes down to what is my requirement and how do I optimize my requirement. And the better you get at understanding the requirements and when you can start to pop off, like the easier those decisions become. Then you enter for Mega Magic the initial setup phase, I'm going to call it, where you are aligning the pieces together. Then you have the actual execution of like phase one, building up conduit counters, building up, oh my god. There's like 4 different phases to this particular combo, right?
Yeah.
And which ones being deterministic versus not deterministic, I think changes your perspective on like
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
how fun is it for like the natural variance within card games. I almost wished this combo, by the way, was like deterministic, could go through the entirety of the corpse deck, so we could just hand wave it and say, "Do you understand what's happening? You see how I go infinite?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Let's see all of the cards."
It would be better, I think, for this as a combo is like it was a little bit harder to get the step where all of the combo pieces were on the board, but then once they were all on the board and all the right conditions were hit, it was just like, okay, yeah, it actually conduit counters can go to 1,000, and we'll see all of RNT, right?
Right.
But like right now,
Yeah.
it's actually this funky thing of like you have to play it out because R&D could be dry. There could be a weird thing on this random face down card. Like there's just so many like you actually have to play out all of these clicks in a way that like if it was a there are other games where it's just like a stronger combo is like okay I hit my condition, it's done, and this deck wins so like the win condition for this deck is a little bit soft enough that you actually have to get all the way to the end to find out.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit like it might actually mean that like while this deck is cool, it actually isn't like a quote unquote real deck, though it clearly did fairly well at this last weekend. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of question from that perspective. And yeah, it's like yeah, people do want variance, but they also want an envelope of variance. Like you don't just want every game to be random.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, I think that's sort of my thoughts on it. It's definitely not ideal from an organized play perspective to have someone taking a 10, 15, 20-minute turn somewhat like consistently. But I also I have played in and observed games where the runner taking a 10-minute turn against a glacier deck wasn't slow. Like everyone was like, yeah, this is, while you could make an argument for being slow play, it was actually thinking out, like finding out information, having to recalculate what their lines were, and like it was reasonable to take a long time on a runner turn that involves 0 combo pieces at all. And so just trying to put like a hard cap on amount of time or amount of clicks taken in an organized play policy document is not the role of an organized play policy.
Yeah.
But Yeah. I think we're going to talk about this question. I actually want to talk about this question because I think it's a really good question, but like we have gone almost half an hour past the time, and Safer is about to fall into bed. And I should too, to be
How
fair.
did you know?
But FFJ just asked, like, am I the asshole for being a slow player? They have a whole story. We'll read it next week. I just want to say, like, you are never the asshole for being a slow player, especially if you are new and learning the ropes. There are probably, like, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but I just want to make sure that, like, people hear the message that, like, there is not a, like, you must be this good to show up to an event, be able to play at this speed to show up to an event. And, like, you know, as you play more, you will get faster, you will learn shortcuts, and people will learn, you'll learn how things work, and people will learn how, like, there's, I don't know, I just want to make sure that you're, like, it's not you should not feel bad for having to play at a speed that you feel is slower than average, because everything is going to have a distribution in the bell curve, even if you never get fast enough for whatever metric you think.
Yep, agree. You're not the asshole, but there's a lot of nuance, and we should talk about it next week.
All right. Well, next week. Huzzah. Yeah. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed this episode. It was a little bit different, but not that different, I guess, in the end. And maybe once the ban list comes out, we'll have everyone come on and predict who they think the best decks in the format will be or something. I don't know when the ban list is coming out. Safer's not going to tell me. But that seems like a fun thing to do, so keep an eye out for that. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks everyone for coming on.
You have some shout-outs. You have some shout-outs.
Oh, yes. I have some shout-outs I'm supposed to do. Last week I was supposed to shout out, I was on an episode of Neon Static talking about when and how much you should run. I am not a good enough runner to feel like I actually gave fantastic advice, but I've been told that it is at least useful advice.
It was good. It was good.
And it was a fun time to record, so hopefully people should go check out Neon Static if they somehow don't already watch it. And I think that episode was good. If you're in New England, you should also go to New Hampshire, because they've got the New England, basically the only districts in New England, this weekend, and I am going to be there barring illness, which I wish was a more firm thing than it actually is. And then hopefully one day Andre, well, I am more likely to be behind Andre, even though we recorded this bit first. A tier list will be out for Vantage Point in a very timely, not month plus into the meta manner.
And I believe Andre is starting to stream.
Oh, like, fantastic. Right, I assume probably is even maybe streaming for 20 minutes at this point, but yeah. All right. Thanks everyone. Safer, as always, great to chat with you. And
yep.
See everyone next week.